And here we're going to see another element. We're going to be looking at Soviet totalitarianism, and we're going to go through Leninism to Stalinism. I do want to point out before we start here, Dr. McKay seems to take more of a 1980s approach to Lenin, almost romanticizes him. But since the 1990s, we've had access to so much more. We want to point out that Lenin is not this idealistic guy. He is as mean and as gruff as any of the other dictators. But with that said, let's look at Lenin's last years. By the 1921, he declared that war communism had become successful in winning the Civil War. And war communism was this miserable, was his economic ideals of super centralization that ultimately led to famine, destruction, and chaos. But what he did, he utilized propaganda, utilized rhetoric, and said, hey, war communism was always meant to be temporary. Nowhere in this notes before this moment did we see this. So we connected the April thesis. The April thesis clearly lines up to all this war communism, but because it failed to secure any true stability, he made a break and established the new economic policy. The NEP was a very important policy that breaks away from this totalitarianism, and the whole purpose was to stabilize Lenin's dictatorship. As we define it, it's an economic policy that allowed for some private ownership while maintaining nationalization of banks, rails, and other industries. Really kind of significant here. We see by 1926, industrial output surpassed as well as agricultural output almost equaled pre-war levels. So this NEP is really an important element. I do want to point out the successful farmers are going to be called the kulaks. We're going to see them later. And there was this romantic hope that we were going to see this progress go forever. This was a very exciting time for this lower middle class, if you will. Unfortunately, it's a problem of succession. From late 1922 into 24 before his death, Lenin became an invalid due to a series of really terrible strokes. And we see this image here, this photograph. A little crazy that they actually took this photograph. Clearly he's not with us. And this was at the peak of his leadership. And now all of a sudden we don't have any real foresight. His succession plan was not known by most. And when his last will and testament was read to the Politburo, it created more confusion than answers. He criticized in his last will, he criticized Stalin, criticized Trotsky, criticized everyone. So almost to the point that Lenin doesn't really he never developed a full plan. So from 1924 to 1928, key Soviet leaders politicked for positioning to be the next leader. And this politicking is really terrible stuff. It's really weird that they're using this kind of mass politic element. They're using this mass politic element in an area in which there's no mass politics. There's no voting. This is a dictatorship. So it's more about using positioning for power. And when we look at here, the struggle for power, here we see Trotsky. And again, I think this is a better picture of Trotsky some of you guys had in class. But his personal characteristics, he's charismatic, well-spoken, heroic. He was a leader of the Red Army. He was politically attractive. So he appears to, we know that he was this right-hand man to Lenin. We know that he shifted from being a Menshevik to a Bolshevik in 1976. He was responsible for bringing victory in 1917 and then bringing victory by 1921. Absolutely reorganized the Red Army, was the guy you would want to be your leader. His key policies, he really, from 1924 to 1928, he was really thinking. He became a visionary. He began to preach the need for a permanent revolution. He wanted to use the vanguards that were established by Lenin's April thesis to help extend this revolution, going into Germany, going into Great Britain, and even the United States, and that he really argued to the Soviet communists that we must do this so that we can borrow from their industries and their knowledge, so that we can reconstruct our infrastructure. By this time, that romantic dream of how a peasant proletariat revolution was going to lead this infrastructure, it died with war communism. And Trotsky's like, hey, we need to figure this out. Additionally, he argued that for rapid industrialization, he believed that they had to end the NEP and begin to go towards a state-sponsored rapid industrialization. Really a break. There were moderate Soviets that were really nervous about, the outcomes of war communism, and Trotsky was trying to convince them that he knew better. And that's going to lead us right to Comrade Stalin. Joseph Stalin, I did purposely pick this goofy picture of him, but his personal characteristics, he was introverted, so he was the opposite of charismatic, not well spoken. He was an organizer. His nickname was Comrade Index Card. They made fun of him for his highly organized filing system, and this was not a nice nickname. But the whole point was they believed that he was too busy in organizing and he had no vision. And his key policies are going to develop are really going to be anti-Trotsky. By the time he's kind of utilized this, by the time we get to the mid 1920s, he's identified that he's in a position that he can secure power. So he begins to preach socialism in one country. This is an opposite of that permanent revolution. If communism was so successful in the Soviet Union, then everyone else would want to do it. So instead of fighting the revolution and sending their boys to die, they could utilize propaganda and these industrial successes they would see. And he also, to gain more support, promised to continue the NEP. This was really important as he secured a friendship and from the editor of Pravda. Pravda was a Soviet newspaper called The Truth, and he actually endorsed Stalin's plan because he was really excited about this continued NEP and Stalin. So now all of a sudden, Stalin and Trotsky, which one is going to be the legacy of Lenin? Is it the permanent revolution? Is it rapid industrialization? Or is it going to be socialism in one country in the NEP? Well, Stalin ended up shocking really the world. I think everybody thought Trotsky was going to be the leader, but by the time we get to 1928, clearly he's been outmaneuvered. Stalin convinced other party leaders that he alone knew Lenin's agenda. Stalin had politicked Trotsky into a marginalized position by gaining more allies. Stalin purged party membership of key Trotsky supporters. Remember, he is Comrade Index Card. He's the one that organized the party memberships. So on the eve of the election in 1928, he literally purged the rolls of Trotsky supporters. So when those supporters came to the Politburo to vote for Trotsky, they were excluded. And again, you think this would cause an uproar, but people were really buying into Stalin. And by 1928, Stalin emerged as the general secretary of the USSR, and he is going to be the leader. And Trotsky is going to be in exile in 1928, and in 1940, Stalin's secret police will locate him in Mexico City and execute him with, from what I've understood, a ice pick to the forehead. But we see this element. Trotsky has now been excluded, removed from the country, and now Stalin is going to be able to make his moves. I'm going to pause here. I just wanted to finish with the idea of how he won power.